going to see far fewer city cars on the market in the coming years, which is welcome news for Hyundai, who has reaffirmed its commitment to the segment by introducing this third-generation version of its popular i10 tiny hatch. It's billed as the most high-tech city car ever. It might also be the most complete one too.
Some manufacturers will these days tell you that making a tiny little A-segment city car, something less than supermini sized, just doesn't make economic sense anymore. Hyundai disagrees, as you'd expect it might. The Korean brand has long been a European market leader in the city car sector and aims to continue that showing with this much improved third-generation design. Launched in early 2020, it enters a market vastly reduced in size in terms of competitive offerings. Just prior to this car's introduction, four key rivals, Vauxhall's Viva, the Ford Ka+, Suzuki's Celerio and the Renault Twingo, were discontinued entirely, while combustion engine versions of the Seat Mii, the Skoda Citigo and the Smart 44 were also deleted, effectively cutting the city car market in half. The combustion engine versions of the Fiat 500 and the Italian brand's Panda model may not last too much longer either, which leaves this i10 and its identically engineered cousin, the Kia Picanto, fighting against either the Volkswagen Up or the single design branded as either a Peugeot 108, a Citroën C1 or a Toyota Aygo. So it's not too hard to imagine a future scenario where Hyundai almost has this city scoop marketplace to itself, which would probably suit the Koreans down to the ground. The Hyundai Kia conglomerate have pretty much owned this market since 2007, when the introduction of the first generation PA series i10 fortuitously coincided with the introduction of a UK government scrappage scheme that saw a number of tired old cars being taken off our roads, resulting in a commensurate quantity of buyers with a modest sum of cash in their hands looking for something to buy. The Mark I i10 was an ideal candidate. Practical and good-looking, plus it didn't cost much and drove well. Sales skyrocketed, and for a short while the i10 was actually this country's best-selling car. It didn't last, of course, but this model had established itself in the public consciousness, so market segment leadership was retained when a second-generation IA series version of this design was launched in 2013. That was a very complete product, but it didn't quite have the stylised appeal of some trendy rivals. This Mark III LA series version just might, though. It's fractionally bigger, more than a fraction sassier, and a great deal more sophisticated than any car this small and affordable has any right to be. Let's check it out. There are a few things you want to tick off as soon as you get yourself seated behind the wheel of a good city car. The first is visibility. If you're going to be jinking from lane to lane, you need great all-round sight lines. This i10 scores well in that regard, with good mirrors, windscreen pillars that aren't too obtrusive, and a fairly high seat height. This Mark III model's reduced belt line at the front, where it's 11mm lower, and rear of the vehicle, it's 13mm lower there, provides drivers with a better view of the road on both sides, as well as a sleeker design. In combination with less C-pillar obstruction, now 11.9 degrees and down from 13.1 degrees, drivers have better visibility when performing parking manoeuvres. The second point is steering. If there's one thing that instantly takes the shine off a city car, it's a heavy, unresponsive feel at the helm. So it's appropriate that the i10's rack is light and easy, perfect for low-speed manoeuvring and parking, which is when you'll need the third thing that all tiny urban runabouts really ought to have, a small turning circle. Here it's 4.86 metres, which means fewer than 3 turns of the wheel lock to lock. So if you spot a parking space on the other side of the road, you'll find that this i10 will be able to quickly change course and dive into it. Another area you might think to be significant in terms of city car segment driving attributes is the ease with which a model of this kind is able to adapt to life beyond town tarmac. In some ways, the two earlier generation versions of this i10 coped quite well in this kind of environment. Those models didn't feel too out of their depth on highways, weren't overly affected by crosswinds, and weren't ear-splittingly noisy at legal limit cruising speeds. Not by city car standards anyway. Things weren't quite so good though if the need arose to push on a little on twisting secondary roads. At that point you quickly realised that the light steering you'd appreciated so much in the city wasn't telling you very much about what the front wheels were doing, and that the suspension, which seemed so well judged for low speed tarmac tears, got quite unsettled over higher speed bumps, enough to make you want to quickly back off. It would perhaps be too much to expect these issues to have been completely solved by the relatively minor engineering tweaks that have been made to this Mark III model. Hyundai claims to have made some changes to the rear torsion beam axle to improve stability, and has added a strengthened steering torsion bar to improve steering response. There's now a quicker ratio. To be frank, the differences over what was on offer before are difficult to discern, which means that this i10 continues to lag a little behind the standard set by its key rival in this regard, the Volkswagen Up, but the difference isn't that significant. Engine-wise, not much has changed, not in the mainstream range anyway. As usual in an i10, buyers primarily choose between either a 3-cylinder, 1-litre 67 PS MPI unit, which makes 62 miles an hour in 14.6 seconds en route to 97 miles an hour, or the 4-cylinder 1.2-litre 84 PS Kappa MPI power plant, which is what we have here, an engine that improves those figures to 12.6 seconds and 106 miles an hour, which is a bit more like it. Both engines can be had with either 5-speed manual transmission or a new 5-speed automated AMT auto gearbox, which unfortunately has now replaced the previous, more conventional torque converter 4-speed auto that was used in the old Mark II model. To be frank, we'd counsel you to avoid that AMT semi-auto box unless you really are completely urban bound. It's very slow and jerky, and when mated to the 1-litre engine, slows the rest to 62 mile an hour sprint time to a yawning 17.3 seconds, making an i10 1-litre AMT model one of the very slowest cars it's possible to buy on the UK market. There's a kind of street cred to that, I suppose. At the opposite end of the dynamic scale lies the flagship i10 model, the i10 N-Line. Here you get the 1-litre GDI 3-cylinder turbo engine from the larger i20 Supermini, complete with 100 PS and 172 Newton meters of pulling power. If you don't mind paying Supermini money for this top variant, you'll find that it'll deliver you quite as much spark as you'll need from a car of this kind. And thank goodness, it only comes with the 5-speed manual gearbox. There used to be only two ways you could style a city car. One was the small and cute approach championed by models like the Fiat 500. The other represented the more versatile and practical option promised by contenders like earlier versions of this i10. In the last few years, though, the waters have been muddied here, a number of new segment contenders proving that style in this sector could be practical and practicality could be stylish. In short, the bar has been raised, and for this generation, this third generation LA Series i10, Hyundai's penmen realised they'd need to bring us something a touch more characterful. To be fair, they knew that anyway. Smart design already the #1 reason for the company's increasing market share, with models across its range shaped by a flowing so-called fluidic sculpture styling philosophy that now continues here. Does it work? You be the judge. Design-wise, everything's new here. This Mark III i10 sitting 20mm wider than its predecessor. Plus there are slimmer headlights, and on high-spec models, these lovely LED spot lamps that sit at the edges of this wider front grille. They give it a slightly more upmarket look too. The grille is matte black with the two mainstream trim levels, but gains this glossy black trim with top premium spec. Go big is the strapline Hyundai has used for this third generation model, and indeed it is slightly bigger than its predecessor, though not by much, length having increased by 5mm. More significant is the way that this clean, smoothly muscled body now sits 20mm lower and incorporates clever visual touches like this X-shaped C-pillar. This clearly identifies the car and draws the eye to the pillar-mounted i10 logo. To meet the fashionable needs of the moment, buyers can specify the kind of two-tone roof that we have here, finished in either black or, as in this case, red. And wheel sizes, which start with either 14 or 15-inch rims, range right up to eye-catching 16-inch alloys for this top premium spec version. At the rear, two horizontal crease lines break up the soft surfaces of the boot and run into the tailgate graphics. There's an involved bumper design, and as before, there's a subtle roof spoiler and this neat bee sting style roof antennae. Time to take a seat up front. The cabin of the previous second generation i10 model was class-leadingly spacious and practical, but rather dull compared to obvious rivals, which is why the Koreans have tried a bit harder on the stylistic front this time round. So we're served up intricate corner vents and this trendier silvered mid-level fascia strip, which on top models features this honeycomb 3D pattern in front of the passenger, which is carried on into the door tops. The emphasis is still very firmly on sensibility rather than street cred, and the whole thing's still lacking a dash of Volkswagen Up or Fiat 500 style character. But at least now there's a little less of the kind of feeling that you're at the wheel of some sort of domestic appliance. And it's certainly very sophisticated in here for an A-segment city car, mainly because of the inclusion of the largest centre dash touchscreen in the segment. Avoid entry-level trim and you'll find that this display is 8 inches in size, though if you don't add in the optional navigation system, it doesn't actually do very much. Bluetooth, a 4-speaker DAB audio system, and that's about it. But this doesn't matter unduly because it includes Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, smartphone mirroring, so you can easily pair the screen to your phone handset and get the whole setup to read out messages and access your favourite apps. Upgrade to navigation and you also get a suite of the brand's latest BlueLink connected telematics car services, these operating via a connected app. Now, between the analogue dials in the instrument cluster, there's another, much smaller screen, this one's black and white, which gives you trip computer data, a digital speedo and safety info. Let's also talk about some of the more fundamental aspects of this cabin. The seating position, for example. Very often in small, tall cars, the designers create extra cabin space by mounting the front seats with rather upright positioning, which can make the driver feel that he or she is perched on rather than in the seat. There's none of that here. In an i10, the positioning is almost as natural and comfortable as it would be in the kind of larger supermini from the next class up, that actually wouldn't be a lot bigger than this car in terms of all the dimensions that really matter. There are a few minor annoyances though, like the way that the wheel only adjusts for height, not for reach, and the fact that seat adjustment must be done with a lever rather than a rotary wheel. What else? Well, the dashboard is as logically laid out as you'd expect from a Hyundai, and while some of the plastics are still a little way from the fashionable soft-feeling materials that you get on some larger, pricier superminis, you know what? It doesn't really matter in a shopping runabout like this. Do you really want to be introducing the weight of a huge slush-moulded fascia into a city car? Exactly. Anyway, the key touch points seem to us to be pretty nicely fabricated, with steering wheel, gear lever and buttons on the dash functioning with greater quality than you'd normally have any right to expect at this price point. In fact, there's an uncannily Germanic feel to them, which isn't surprising when you remember that the fatherland is actually where this car was designed. Over-the-shoulder vision is aided by this Mark III design's lower belt line and slimmer C-pillar. Plus, provided you avoid entry-level trim, you get a rear-view camera too. Though if you need something like that to park a car this small, perhaps a visit to the opticians might be recommended. Big car features on top models include luxuries like heat for the steering wheel and the front seats, and an optional wireless phone charging mat. As for storage space, well, there's a big glove box with a ledge just above, a couple of cup holders between the seats, and a deep bin in front of the gear stick with a 12-volt port and a USB point just above. The door bins are a bit small, but there's an angled recess just below the gear stick, another in the door pulls, there's another alongside the handbrake. There are vanity mirrors on both sun visors and a ticket clip on the driver's sun visor. Right, let's take a look in the back seat. Significant here is the news that the wheelbase has increased by 40 millimetres, pushing the wheels further out to the corners so as to improve cabin space. And that's paid dividends in the back. This i10 was always a good pick if you wanted a city car with an interior nearly as big as a supermini. Now that's even more the case. Hyundai reckons that a couple of big adults will now be quite comfortable in the rear, an achievement for a car of this kind. And at a pinch, you might even fit a third person in too. Legroom will of course be at a bit of a premium. This car is, after all, only 3.67 metres in overall length, but these recesses in the front seat backs help. These optional shale grey centre light coloured seat facings will mark easily, so choose your trim carefully if you've messy children. The door bins are very reasonably sized for a city car, and rear folk can also use this little cubby behind the handbrake. There are cubbies in the door pulls and upper coat hooks. Out back, the decently sized 252-litre boot is the same size as that of the previous generation model, which means it remains class-leadingly big. By contrast, the Volkswagen Up offers 251 litres, so Hyundai just squeaks in above the class benchmark. Both models are way better in this regard than the Peugeot 108, Citroën C1, Toyota Aygo design, which offers just 196 litres of boot space. Essentially, you're almost getting a trunk that's as big as that of a supermini here. That of a Fiesta is 292 litres, for example. There are two bag hooks, light on the left and a bit more space under the floor around the tyre repair kit. Push the 60-40 split backrest down and capacity rises to 1,050 litres. Pricing starts at around £13,000, which is around double what the first generation version of this car cost when it debuted back in 2007. Your wage slip probably hasn't become 100% bigger in that time, but c'est la vie. Anyway, that base figure applies to the base SE level of trim that few customers want, a level of spec that can only be had with the feeblest 1-litre MPI 3-cylinder engine. Most will stretch to mid-range SE Connect spec, costing around £1,000 more, which is what you'll have to do if you want the option of paying your dealer £500 more to get the AMT 5-speed automated gearbox with this car. The 4-cylinder 84 PS 1.2 MPI engine we're trying here costs a £300 premium over the 67 PS MPI 1-litre unit. And again, with that, the AMT Auto is £500 more if you feel you simply have to have it. For a top-spec 1.2-litre premium variant, like we have here, you're looking at just under £16,000. To give you some class perspective, all this car's key rivals are priced at about the same level, and there aren't too many of them in the city car segment these days. You've got this car's identically engineered cousin, the Kia Picanto. Then there's the Volkswagen Up, and the single design we know as either a Peugeot 108, a Citroën C1 or a Toyota Aygo. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that the Up, The Peugeot, the Citroën and the Toyota can be ordered with 3 or 5 doors. This Hyundai only comes with this 5-door body style. Even the base SE model gets powered mirrors, an alarm and auto headlamps. And inside you'll find a DAB radio with a 3.8-inch display, though with only 2 speakers. Plus there's Bluetooth, air conditioning, a leather steering wheel and gear lever, and even cruise control with a speed limiter. As just mentioned though, you're almost certainly going to want to stretch at least as far as mid-range SE Connect trim. This gets you key extras like 15-inch alloy wheels and the bigger 8-inch centre console touchscreen display audio system. The better quality infotainment setup comes with Apple CarPlay, Android Auto smartphone mirroring, Bluetooth voice recognition, a rear view camera and 2 extra audio speakers in the rear. Here we've got the top premium spec model, identifiable by its 16-inch wheels, bifunction projection headlamps, LED daytime running lights, front fog lights, privacy glass and glossy black finish for its front grille. A key benefit of going for this top premium spec model is that you then get the opportunity to order the optional tech pack, which adds navigation to the 8-inch centre dash touchscreen, along with Hyundai's suite of live services and the brand's latest Blue Link telematics system, which allows you to monitor many aspects of your car from your smartphone. Plus, you also get intelligent speed limit warning and a wireless charging mat as part of that extra cost package. You'll also need to buy an above mid-range trim if you want the option of this contrast coloured roof, which can be had in black or, as in this case, red. And only premium spec buyers can lighten the seat trim with an extra cost shale grey fabric finish. Across the range, there's the option of metallic or pearl finish paint for £550 more. We should also mention the top N-Line model, which is the only one you can order with Hyundai's 1-litre TGDI 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine. Here, exterior design enhancements include unique bumpers and a unique grille, giving a dynamic look that is supposed to have been inspired by Hyundai's engagement in motorsport. And N-Line buyers also get exclusive 16-inch alloy wheels, plus an i10 sign in red font, as well as a skid plate and diffuser. Refreshingly, a high level of safety kit is standard whichever trim level you buy into. We're pleased to see that Hyundai has added in its forward safety AEB autonomous emergency braking system to this Mark III model, which comes complete with a forward collision warning system. Also new is an e-call setup which uses GPS data to alert the emergency services to your exact location if the airbags go off. And there's driver attention alert, which monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness and will alert you if it thinks you need to stop for a restorative coffee. Lane departure warning is standard too, complete with lane keep assist, which will apply subtle steering lock to ease you back to where you ought to be if you drift out of your lane on the highway. More common safety features include front, side and curtain airbags, a brake assist system for emergency stops, hill start assist control, electronic stability control and a tyre pressure monitoring system. The i10 shouldn't cost much to run. Let's get to the WLTP figures. The 1-litre 3-cylinder MPI manual variant in base SE form manages 56.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 114 grams per kilometre of CO2 emissions. It's 54.3 miles to the gallon and 119 grams per kilometre with more typical mid-range SE Connect trim. For the 1-litre AMT Auto with SE Connect trim, you're looking at 50.4 miles to the gallon and a 126 grams per kilometre CO2 figure. For the 4-cylinder 1.2-litre variant, it's 52.3 miles to the gallon and 124 grams per kilometre for the manual model and 49.6 miles to the gallon and 130 grams per kilometre for the AMT Auto. There'll be a fractional reduction in the figures just quoted if you opt for this top premium level of trim with its larger 16-inch wheels. And obviously the top 1 litre T GDI Turbo N-Line sporting variant will be a fraction less frugal still. The idle stop-and-go ISG system is a standard feature for all powertrains, which contributes to lower fuel consumption, lower CO2 emissions and higher efficiency. The fuel savings of using the ISG setup are especially apparent when driving in urban areas, as the ISG automatically switches off the engine when the car comes to a halt. There's even an instrument cluster display to tell you how long the stop-and-go feature has been in operation in any given journey, though actually I can't really think why you'd ever want to know that. Satisfied owners will tell you that the i10 proposition is about a whole lot more than just a 5-year warranty with a car thrown in for good measure, but there's no doubt that the comprehensive after-sales package does remain a major attraction for city segment customers. It's a really good unlimited mileage deal that also includes annual vehicle health checks and roadside assistance to add peace of mind. Plus, you can budget ahead for garage visits by opting for one of the Korean company's fixed price service plans. There's a 3-year package that covers you for up to 30,000 miles, or a 5-year program that extends that to as much as 50,000 miles. Insurance is rated at either Group 4E or 5E. Let's also give you some residual values based on 3 years and 30,000 miles of ownership. After that period, your i10 should still be worth 42% of its original value. Having seen off many of its main segment rivals, this Mark III model i10 looks set to consolidate its strong position in the citycar segment. Try one of these, and it's genuinely hard to imagine why you'd want to pay a lot more for a Fiesta-sized supermini. This little Hyundai gives you almost as much rear passenger room and boot space as something like that, but will cost less to run and will be easier to park. Now that its cabin has been upgraded, you don't even feel too much like you bought into a budget segment car either. In summary, city cars have evolved. These used to be models people went for because they had to. Now so often they're little runabouts customers own out of choice. For all the industry plaudits the affordable little first and second generation i10 models received, they weren't cars you'd ever have felt especially joyful about owning. But specified correctly, this improved third generation model absolutely could be. Here's our advice: before you sign for that supermini, try one of these first.